Hello, this is Jay Mitchell. We are back from another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have Fight Back Podcast gives insights into the theories behind the deadly AES explosion, their government contracts, and recent conflicts, posted by your Smirking Revenge. And I guess that's the clip, a 2-minute clip of them saying that on their podcast. And yeah, personally, I would definitely agree that, when it comes to a lot of stuff, there might be some government fuckery going around, so to say. The government's not going to be open and always tell you something about everything. They'll always try and keep a lot of it down low. I definitely do think it's important to question everything like that. Whenever it comes to the government, it's always important to, hold them accountable, even if they're not going to hold themselves accountable, which is pretty much all the time. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Who Else is Sick of These Conflicts, posted by Marky Jr., and they have a meme: war is big government, stop funding endless wars, no nation building with tax dollars, defend America, not the world, vote Libertarian Party. And I'd agree with that. The Libertarian Party is probably never going to be too successful in a world where, 40% of the population is going to go Republican no matter what, and another 40% of the population is going to go Democrat no matter what. But, even if you're not going to win elections, you still can stand by your principles and run as a third party, such as the Libertarian Party. I think that's very admirable. A lot of people these days, they'll just sell out to the highest bidder. They have no principles, and that's increasingly, and that's definitely true when it comes to the major parties. The major parties will sell out all their principles at the drop of the hat. Well, the Libertarian Party and a lot of other third parties will keep to their principles through hell or high water. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, is Trump paranoid too much about Iran, posted by China Military Secrets, and that's a meme of a picture of Donald Trump. All the innocent, sane people are locked up in mental asylums, and all the crazy people are roaming free in the White House. And then it cuts to Ronald McDonald on the phone. It says, make Canada the 51st state, Iran can't be trusted to have nukes, Japan still wants revenge for World War II, the Italians are so loud that I can hear them talking about you from the Oval Office. Sorry, Trump, but McDonald's doesn't have a chicken McNugget lasagna on the menu. And yeah, I would agree with that. The inmates are clearly running the asylum, but I think that's pretty par for the course when it comes to the U.S. government at this point. Reddit only cares about Trump because he's marketed as the worst thing ever, but it's really just par for the course. The president's really just a figurehead. The deep state's the one really running the government. I think that's important to remember as well. Trump might seem like an all-powerful entity because of the brand he's created for himself, but he's really just a figurehead, just like Obama, Biden, Bush, Clinton, and all the others before him, pretty much. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, Trump exempted some of the nation's biggest polluters from air quality rules. All it took was an email. Special exceptions are subsidies. Quote from ProPublica.org, hosted by Woke Boogeyman. And yeah, I would agree with that. If I don't think some companies should be exempted while others aren't, but ultimately the government can exempt for whoever it wants for whatever reason it wants, and sometimes there's nothing you should do about it. Ideally, the libertarian position is we wouldn't have any air quality rules in the first place, but ultimately, if the government wants to have some companies forced to obey them, while larger companies aren't, that just goes to show you that, the government can justify whatever it feels like, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next we have, he's a U.S. citizen and combat veteran. ICE tear gas jailed and falsely accused him, from Reason.com, posted by Jai Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that, but it just goes to show you it doesn't really matter what your citizenship status or military status are. The government can come after you for whatever reason it feels like, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. That's why I think the libertarian position is, maybe, if it's possible, don't get near ICE. I don't know if what the story is here. If he was protesting ICE, or if ICE just came after him unprompted. But regardless, the libertarian position is don't avoid state agents of the law, whether they be the local police or ICE, unless of course you need them. But because, ultimately, they're interacting with them is only going to result in a recipe for trouble a lot of the time, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Maryland citizens slapped with $2 billion power grid upgrade bill for out-of-state AI data centers. Public funds funded handouts for the wealthy from tomshardware.com, posted by Local Man. That's crosspost from the technology subreddit. Maryland citizens slapped with $2 billion power grid upgrade bill for out-of-state AI data centers. State companies to federal energy regulators. It says additional cost breaks ratepayer protection pledge promises. And yeah, personally, I don't think taxpayers should be forced to pay for out-of-state AI data centers, but ultimately, when it comes to taxes, you're forced to pay them, and you don't even know where the money's going to go to. It may go to out-of-state AI data centers. So that's why I think the libertarian position is, taxation should first and foremost be voluntary, but if it is involuntary, you should at very least be able to earmark where your taxpayer dollars go to. And but sadly, I don't know how realistic either of those things is, especially when the government, we live in a very consent-based culture, as I noted last time. But, suddenly that goes all out the window when it comes to taxation and pretty much the rest of the state in general. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have bill banning whites-only housing passes Pennsylvania House by one vote, post from WKRG.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, personally, I would disagree with that. I don't think people should have segregated communities, but if they're voluntary and all members of the community agree to have it like that, I think they should be able to if they want to. I would be fine if a blacks-only community or an Asians-only community or a Hispanics-only community as well. It's ultimately individual choice and freedom of association, and, I personally don't care for segregation, but if people want to do it, and it's a private organization, I think they should be able to. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have MAGAs are fuming after email confirms they will never get their $500 Trump phones or deposits back from ibatimes.co.uk, posted by Donald Key, and that's crosspost from the Leopards Ate My Face subreddit. And yeah, personally, if you want to justify shelling out $500 for a Trump phone, you should be able to, but, just be aware that, a lot of times, Trump's not going to deliver, and I think that's important to remember as well. You got to do your research before you shell out $500 for something, and that definitely includes a Trump phone, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Trump gave $6.9 million contract to his pool guy under exemption for urgent situations from independent.co.uk, posted by Woke Boogeyman. And yeah, personally, I don't think the government should be giving $7 million contracts to pool guys, but ultimately, the government can throw money at wherever it wants to, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next, we have Republican Facebook got their talking point orders, posted by FastSteveRavenous739, and that's a crosspost from the anarcho-capitalism subreddit, and that's a post from Facebook, largest Trump supporting group in the world. I don't care if the hantavirus joins forces with HIV, monkeypox, and COVID to become a Marvel Comics supervirus. I'll never comply with another public health order for the rest of my life. And then the next post says, Trump learning Republicans in spirited debate. I don't care if the bird flu joins forces of HIV, monkeypox, and COVID to be a Marvel Comics supervirus. I'll never comply with another public health order for the rest of my life. And then the OP added, but this begs question, these people previously get their medical advice from the government. And yeah, personally, I think I don't agree with everything that Trump supporting groups on Facebook say, but I definitely would agree with this point. I don't care how deadly the virus gets. It's just going to be used as an excuse to take away our personal freedoms, and the government loves to use anything as an excuse to do that, but especially public health matters, as we saw with COVID. So ultimately, if you want to protect yourself and against the virus, that's fine. If you want to think it's more deadly than Ebola and wear a hazmat suit, that's fine. But you don't have the right to anyone else's body when it comes to matters of public health. That's the libertarian position. People might be sick and carry the virus unknowingly. I think intentionally spreading the virus would be a NAT violation. But regardless, I think as long as there's always some virus out there. The flu's kills a lot of people every year too, and we didn't shut down society for the flu. So ultimately, it should come down to individual choice how each person wants to react to the virus, just like any other virus. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Republicans don't want to talk about gas prices anymore from notus.org, posted by Donald Key. And yeah, if I guess, I think it's interesting, Reddit made every excuse for gas prices under Biden, but now that they're bad under Trump, they think they're the worst thing ever. Same with the price of eggs, the price of eggs was nothing, was swept under the rug under Biden, but now they were bad under Trump, suddenly they're the worst thing ever. It just goes to show you, no principles, only teams. They'll make every excuse for their book when their team's in power, but the second the outgroup takes power, suddenly, they care all about the economy, and it just goes to show you, no principles, only teams. They're like, oh, inflation's rising. Well, inflation was just as bad, if not worse, under Biden, and that's another thing that's important to remember. Next we have, are Americans just bad at accounting, posted by Woke Boogeyman, and that's a cross post from the SIPST subreddit. This actually made me think, and it looks like a tweet from Alex Carlson tweeted, why is Denmark consistently ranked among the happiest countries by having some of the highest taxes in the world? And then Chris Lundardis replied, you guys are obsessed with the tax rate, but you ignore the life rate. If you add your taxes plus health insurance plus co-pays plus tuition plus daycare plus retirement savings, you're paying way more than we are. We just pay one bill and get everything included. You were paying 5 different bills and getting nothing. We aren't socialists, we're just better at accounting. And yeah, personally, I do think that's a decent point, but you have to remember that Denmark has a population roughly that size of Phoenix, Arizona, where the U.S. has a population like almost over 100 times that, or something like that. I don't know the exact math, but the U.S. has a much bigger population, and it might not the same tactic might not work here. And I think that's important to remember as well. I think if people want to want to have the government pay for their health insurance, co-pays, tuition, daycare, retirement savings, and all that, I think that's fine. But, ultimately, I don't think they should be forced. If they want to earmark their tax dollars, I think that's fine. But, they shouldn't be forced to pay for anything if they don't want to. And that's very much the libertarian position. Next we have, how much has the Iran war actually cost? A lot more than $25 billion from Reason.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for the Iran war, but, ultimately, it just goes to show you Trump ran on no new wars, but then he just got us into another war. It just goes to show you about Hadishin oftentimes going to say one thing on the campaign trail and then do the opposite in office. If you think it would be different under Kamala, you're pretty much just Charlie Brown thinking Lucy's really gonna let him kick the football this time. Maybe it wouldn't be. Maybe Kamala wasn't as up Israel's ass as Trump is. So I don't know if she'd go for it for Israel's idea to bomb Iran and get us into war with them. But ultimately, I still do think that there would be definitely tension in Iran and possible war if Kamala was there. And it just goes to show you, they're pretty much a uniparty. They agree on 95% on everything. They just use divisive culture war issues like LGBTQ and abortion to divide people. When in reality, they agree on pretty much everything. And you definitely probably would see this war as well even if the Democrats were in power. Even if they are, I must begrudgingly admit, probably the better party on Iran with the Iran deal and all that. They used to have that at least, but now they're pretty much just as war-hungry as the Republicans are in regards to Iran. Next we have Trump's complaints about Iran war leaks prompt aggressive DOJ investigations from WSJ.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, personally, if the government sometimes are going to be leaks, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. If the DOJ wants to investigate, then I think that's fine. But, ultimately, sometimes stuff is going to leak out there, and there's nothing you can do about it, especially in the world with as much information technology and computer stuff as we have currently. Next we have, are you excited for the 2028 presidential elections, posted by China Military Secrets? And that's a meme they shared. Usha Vance for president, Republican nominee. Ro Khanna for president, Democratic nominee. Who is excited for the 2028 election? I would love to see these upstanding Americans run for president. And yeah, personally, I like Ro Khanna's probably decent for a Democrat, and I don't know if Usha Vance would run, but, I think it'd be interesting if both parties nominate, like, Indians or black people. It's interesting, they both have the same playbook when it comes to, oh, look, we're not racist, here's our token minority we're running, and, people are tired of that, people are tired of the constant identity politics, and it's just can we move on already? If both parties do want to nominate Indian Americans for president, I think they should be able to, but, I think people are just tired of the constant identity politics, especially what it would bring if, both major party nominees were racial minorities. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.